Hi, I'm Greg Timms. I'd like to take this opportunity to welcome you along in the first of a series of BMW Club Queensland short films entitled Who Is? So, who is John Tetley?
Hi Greg, that's a very complicated question at times.
Okay.
We can start by saying he's a septuagenarian who should have more sense than to be in motorsport. But given my life and the number of changes that I've had in my life at different times, I suppose it was undoubted that I would end up somewhere as a bit of a rebel. I came to motorsport very early, and I was a road rally driver in the very early days. I have the sort of notoriety of racing against Peter Brock even in rallies in Victoria. I also have the notoriety of falling off Mount Disappointment and driving over 2,500 feet between trees and ending up in a creek. And in those days when we drove those night rallies, we really drove them. And I do remember the SECV track in Healesville, where I thought, wow, this is pretty good, and decided to take the family for a drive down it the following weekend. And I'm doing 30 mile per hour in daylight, scared shitless. And the Saturday night before, I'd been doing 90 mile per hour down those roads, and never knew that there was an 8,000 foot drop right at the side of the road.
Living on the edge.
Well, that was about when domestic duties took over, and we had to give up motorsport for some years.
That's right.
In that period of time, I went through a number of businesses and ended up with a company called Digital, and spent 25 years with them, doing in a group called Computer Special Systems. And that was where I learned so much about computers in the technical and real-time marketplace. And I really enjoyed that. And the last project that I actually was very active on was the Collins-class submarines. And from that, fundamentally, I retired at that stage. I was 53 and a half. I was already racing Formula Fords, having a good time doing it, and decided to invest in Queensland Raceway, which hadn't been built at the time, but Dennis Brown was the pretty good salesman, I'll put it that way. And that was how we got involved and put several $100,000 on the ground out at Ipswich to build the garage complex. And then thinking that we had retired, and he was this cash cow, and it was just going to be wonderful going forward, and I could go and race my Formula Ford wherever I liked. And then, of course, Queensland Raceway went tits up,
It did.
and something had to be done. And so at that stage, because of my big company experience, and when I say big company, we had 135,000 employees. Even in those days, we were about an $18 billion a year company, and we did these really, in my special little group, we did these big risky operations, train describer systems and things of that nature, a lot of defence systems. So that was where I came from, and thought, right, I'm now done. I've worked hard, burnt my butt out for long enough. I'm just going to go and race my Formula Ford for a little while. That's how I got into it.
Enjoy life.
And then the next thing that happened was, as I say, we had to do something with Queensland Raceway. Too much money on the ground out there to walk away from. So with Amanda's support, we bought the place and the syndicate that we put together. And in 2004, we were in a position we bought out all of the other members of the syndicate. So in sort of about October 04, we had the whole thing from there. Now we'll settle down and retire. We've got a nice business, and then somebody from as in those days, the Pine River Shire Council came up and said, do you think you could do something with Lakeside? And I thought, I could probably go insane with it actually if I tried, but yes, we'll just see where it goes from there. The Pine River Shire Council in 06 went through an expressions of interest process. From that, there were 4 companies shortlisted. The Murdoch press were interested, but only to run a specific event. The Total Driver were interested, but they didn't really have either the skills or the finances to do it. Motorcycling Australia was the other one on the short list, and they really had proven they only wanted to do motorbikes here, and that wasn't going to utilise the place fully.
Probably.
So it sort of fell back down to what we were doing and what we were looking for at that stage, because in 2007, Queensland Raceway operated on a revenue basis 340 days that year. 2008 was already going to be bigger, and the way we were going, we were never going to be able to maintain the place, that is to resurface the track, and it needed to be done badly. So that was why we put our hand up and came in here. So we spent about $3.4 million in renovating Lakeside to get it back up to a position where it could be usable again. And anybody who saw the place in those days, there were cows running through it, the track was almost gone, etc. And so we undertook to rebuild the place. After 2 or 3 court challenges, we were finally able to sign the lease in November 2007. So 2008 we ran a couple of, and I mean a couple, probably 10 or 15, little social events. Now at that stage we got involved with the LMRE and Ian Milton, and so we did some good work for, first start-up motorbike stuff and so on. One of the first things we got right was the driver training centre, so that we could at least reopen the driver training business. And then the main track took another year for us to get to, and in February 2009, after the drought broke, $40,000 worth of boxing up for the new track got washed away. That night we had 12 inches of rain. So that cruelled the project significantly. And then the next thing we discovered was that this track was never built properly. And we brought in a profiler to profile the track. And the profiler sank so far that it took a bulldozer and a grader to push this thing out. And at that stage, we discovered that everything underneath the track was basically sponge. And so we then had to come up with a new method of how do we resurface the track. Which with the Boral people, we worked on that for some time and eventually managed to do it. At that stage we were about $1 million over budget. And that one morning, to get that paver out, and to make good the hole that it left behind was over $60,000 just for that, right?
Pretty expensive.
It was very expensive, and it was a bit heartbreaking because the drought had been in there for so long, and had we started work 2 to 3 weeks earlier, we wouldn't have had any of these problems. But as it turned out, the place was never built to any particular standards. It was fundamentally the Saksowskis. They'd said, let's go and get a grader. Let's go and lay a bit of dirt. We'll go and put something on top of it. That was what Lakeside came from, and that was the biggest shock that we had, was this stuff that we're built on here. It's called highly dispersive, highly expansive clay. What that means is every time it rains, it washes away and it grows. So we had to come up with a system of sealing that before we could even put the track on it. What was meant to be about a 6-week exercise actually turned into over 6 months. And there were things that we wanted to do that just never got done. So Lakeside today is, to me, it's about a 2/3 finished project.
All right.
Yeah. And I look forward to seeing it finished in my lifetime.
Yeah, right, So there's still a little bit of way to go.
Yes, but we've been held up for the last 3 years because of the attitude of the council and some of the statements that have been coming out of the council and threats and so on. So we started out with Pine River Shire Council with a great relationship, and the Mayor, Yvonne Chapman, and so on, very supportive. When it became amalgamated and became Moreton Bay Council, that's when things started to change. And, some of the neighbours, 2 in particular, put in over 1,000 complaints. and they all got listened to.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
And
So-
you were here first.
Well, I wasn't, but Lakeside was.
Yeah.
Well, actually, I was born before Lakeside was born. I suppose that's true. But this is the 59th year of operation for
right.
Lakeside, so we'll be celebrating our, I think it's Ruby, isn't it, the 60th anniversary. So we'll be celebrating our 60th anniversary next year.
Yeah.
And we will do what we did for the 50th, which is that we will put together some special events and go and try and find people that can come out to
Who are
to
still
be part of it.
around and who remember how it all started.
Yes, and there, believe it or not, there are a few. I've
Got their names and addresses, have you? Good.
Well, yes, you've just reminded me of a gaffe I made in an ABC interview when we were organising the 50th one, and gosh, I wish I could remember his name now, but he's a very popular announcer, and he just said to me, and you're trying to find the original drivers, and I said, oh yes, actually the girls have dug up about 50 of them so far. And I just went, yeah,
Well,
no, not
doesn't
really,
come out right.
not really.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Can't take two on that one.
No.
No, fair enough. Now, you did mention there before about noise levels at Lakeside here, John. How does that sort of unfold? Where are the noise meters, where are they?
Okay, well, there are two noise meters on other people's properties. One of them is just about 150 metres that way, which is on Mick Wilkinson's property. And the other one is about 250 metres that way, which is on Darryl Nutley's property.
Right.
Okay. The original agreement that we did with the Pine Rivers Council was 70 decibels to the front door of the reference house, and the reference house was the property directly opposite the second gate. So if you look through to that house, it was always recognised that we couldn't make 70 decibels here because over water and nothing else. So that's why that was specifically excluded in the original lease agreement that we put together. And I'm pleased to say that the other one over at Nutley property, we've never blown that meter, but this meter we blow quite frequently.
So 70 decibels at a location that's 150 metres away from the track.
Yeah, it's impossible. Our conversation now is at 72 decibels at least.
Is that right?
Yeah.
So that seems to me to be a little bit sort of unfair from your operational point of view. Would that be accurate?
It would be. I would say now thousands of people have spent many hundreds of dollars trying to get into the volume levels that the council is now imposing on us. They're not the ones they imposed originally.
Yeah, right.
They changed the rules in about 2013. Okay.
Lower?
Yeah,
So
much,
lower.
quite a lot lower. Well, and that one over there. Interesting. Now we fought back at the time and said no, we can't make that number. And they said this one will only ever be used for monitoring. The one over there will be used for enforcement. We've never blown the enforcement one, but they're enforcing us on that one. Right. So again, you do a deal with somebody of that nature, especially something that critical. You get people to spend their money to meet a certain level of standards that are achievable, and then somebody changes the rules. And that is the reason why we campaigned so hard to get Lakeside into the Southeast Regional Plan. By getting it in there, we're trying to, if you like, lock the position in. So whoever moves in now has got to accept what's in the SERP, and as a result of that, we're fairly confident that we'll be able to operate. But we still are having extreme difficulty operating with road cars on this circuit to the requirements on that meter.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Okay, road car.
Yeah,
So that's
look,
club level racing.
yeah, and look, quite frankly, it's one woman that has put in something like 75-80% of the complaints.
Right.
She has founded a political party based on the fact that Lakeside shouldn't be allowed to continue to operate because it's now a built-up area, and even had her husband stand for mayor, right? And so she is actively campaigning in that way. And I think it's, one of the things that I go on about is Australia's supposed to be a democracy. Free speech is all well and good. If you want to go and stand on a soapbox, go for it. But everybody has the right to be heard. But how much money should the ratepayers of this council, of the MBRC, have to pay out to satisfy complaints that are not really justified? And if you say it's $200 a complaint and there's something like 1,100 complaints gone in, we're talking close to $250,000 of ratepayers' funds have been spent trying to pacify somebody who's never going to be pacified.
No, that's right.
So I have an issue with that. The moral dilemma I have is everybody's entitled to their life. However, I'm not sure they're entitled to go and upset the lives of others. And we have, 50,000 people a year at least coming through the gates of this place, getting enjoyment from it and so on. So where does one person's dislike of a place
overrule
all those others?
Makes sense to me. It shouldn't.
Probably shouldn't, Greg.
But never mind. Now, we did want to quickly talk on the future of motorsport activities here in Queensland, John. So where do you sort of see that heading at the moment?
Okay. We have 3 different demographic bands that we have to deal with. People above the age of 55, and males in particular above the age of 55, grew up in a world where failure was not a problem. It was a learning experience, it was what you did. And so when you take a septuagenarian like me, what are you looking at? You're looking at somebody that is willing to go out on a track and lose.
Yes.
Okay? And not feel any the lesser for that.
No.
So racing today, when we look at it, by and large, is either the sons of people like me or it is the originals. So if we look at our situation, we used to run 23 race meetings a year, and we're now running about 16, and it's going down. And the number of people who want to race, when you walk through the pits, you'll see very few people under the age of 50. What you've got is a secondary cohort between about 35 and 55 who are generally family men. They have it as a family recreational sport. They don't really care too much if they win or lose because they know they've got to pay the school fees and stuff. So we have that cohort coming through. And then we have another cohort which is the under 35 males. And this cohort is not used to losing. Right, little Sebastian will never be held back at school because mummy will see to it. So these people have the unfortunate lack of an ability to handle failure as a constructive exercise. Those people are the people that are growing today. So if we went back to last weekend, we ran a Matsuri. Matsuri is drifting. It is non-competitive. It's just go off, strut your stuff, see how good you do, and if you don't get it right, try again. And that's why, for those people, we don't call it competition. So we have a Friday night drift practice. If we had a Saturday night drift championship, nobody would go to. Interesting. And yet the same people would be there, 110 cars on track, 700 spectators on a Friday night. Last weekend, using that same crowd, hardly anybody over the age of 35, 4,000 spectators, 300-ish entrants at... that are going out there for 24 hours of drifting. Now, isn't that interesting? I can't lose, I can't fail, nobody's going to knock me back. If a tyre blows up, if my car stops or whatever, I'm not to blame. So what we're having to do is cut our cloth more and more to those people. And that's where you see now we run all these theme days, all Aussie, Japnats, all American. Those days now, we're finding the younger guys are coming out and they will do those days as well. And then the true enthusiast collector, the people I call the museum curators, they bring out their 1965 Buick Skylark or something like that. And these people, I had a shot at the government for this the other day. These people should be paid to maintain Queensland's motoring heritage. Not charged, what I think is a lot of money for a car that gets used 4 or 5 times a year. So that was the other cohort that we bring out now with this, and we can call them a super show and shine. and we have a bit of show and go because they actually get to drive around the track and Yahoo a little bit.
And club registration, I think that would sort of encourage that sort of activity, wasn't it?
Well, what I have put forward is that people who collect cars usually collect more than one. There should be a fee for the driver.
Right.
Okay, Greg, so you've got 5 cars, so your fee is $500 per year. That $500 enables you to go to PPQ and get a plate, Greg, okay, and you get 5 of those plates, and you put them on the 5 cars and you nominate the cars that they're on. You can only drive 1 car at once, right?
Yep.
So they're already getting pretty near what they would have been getting out of their full rego anyway for a car that's virtually not on the road. To me, that's a much better way to go. And I've suggested that we probably should have a break point of about 5 cars and maybe 10 cars, and then for idiots like me, about 15 cars.
Right.
Right?
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. You're a true collector then.
No, I'm a very poor salesman.
You can't say no.
Yeah, and I'm a very keen buyer.
There's bargains out there all the time.
Somewhere.
You keep looking for them.
I keep
don't you?
looking, yeah.
And find them.
Yeah.
All right. Now, getting back to Lakeside here.
Yeah.
Lakeside, I believe, is part of the AASA consortium that's structured around sort of Eastern Australia.
Yeah, no, that's not quite right. Let's just go back. I mentioned that I was a man from Mars with high-level management experience when I came into motorsport in 2000 without meaning to. And when I looked around, everything was under cams. And that meant, and we were told, oh, if you don't do it with cams, you can't get insurance, etc. I'm one of the guys that in the early 70s, actually used to race in speedway as well as in cams events.
Right.
And in those days, if you were caught racing in a black event, you were banned for life from cams. So I actually had to race in speedway under an assumed name because of these draconian requirements that cams had back then. The person who tended to break that down was Bob Jane, when he brought in the NASCARs and he said, I'm going to operate outside of cams.
Right.
And he brought in the US motorsport model, and quite frankly, I'm an admirer of that model. It works so much better than the European model, which is a legacy, is what we have here in Australia. Okay. As a result of that, I was able to get all of when I came in, and I said, guys, this is crap. You know, somebody else tells me, and I got everything hanging out on this thing, who can come out to the track, when they can come out to the track, approximately how much I can charge them. I have no control over my revenue sources. That's not a business, that's a victim. So
Too much control.
Well, too much restriction. Okay, so what we said was, look, there needs to be something that can be set up that can run beside that. So I put together something called the Australian Autosport Alliance as an initiative. We had a meeting in Sydney, we had all the other tracks there, and I presented to them an alternative that I believe could be done. Some of the other tracks said, well, not me, thank you very much. Leave it alone, I'm with cams. The problem that you had was that so many of the tracks were actually a rich man's toy. Oran Park belonged to Tony Perridge, and that family, of course, is enormously wealthy with the dairy farmers. Bob Jane with all the stuff that he had and so on, Clem Smith. So when you go through those people, they weren't particularly interested in the racetrack as a business. The investment that I had made said, this is a business and it has to be a business. So that was where I started promoting this idea of an alternate, and I hate to use the term sanctioning body, but because that's the one that's generally used, we'll use that for the moment. So that was put together as the Australian Autosport Alliance. We got a start on that. We went to Lloyd's of London. We put a set of documents on the table. The guy at Lloyd's said, yes, I think we can do this, a man by the name of Andrew Wadsworth. Have you ever been to Lloyd's?
Yes, I have,
the benches?
Yes.
Oh, God, they're awful.
Yes.
Anyway, we came away with an insurance policy.
Did you? Okay.
Yeah.
Backed by Lloyd's.
Backed by Lloyd's,
Right.
Market Form and Caitlin's syndicates, two very good syndicates. We had coverage for everything we wanted. Came back, threw it on the table in front of all of the other guys, and in the finish there was only Mick Ronk and I that would stand up and do it. Everybody else ran away. So we had to find a significant amount of money in 2002, which we did, and that was the start of the what today is called AASA. Mick decided he wanted to take that over, and I don't want to go into the sordid details.
Sure.
But in the finish, the ownership that I had in that wasn't recognised, so I then started up races in 2009 as an alternative to both CAMS and ASA.
Okay.
So in 2009, that was when we made the decision we would have to go on our own. So I went through the same process that I had gone through previously, and now Races is here today with 20,000 licence holders, 800 events, operating in West Australia, South Australia.
Oh, okay. So,
I'm not sure about Victoria, no, certainly New South Wales. We've got 50 events in New South Wales, 50 events in WA. And then, of course, it's also the foundation for all of the activities that we do here. The big thing that sets Races apart is it's not set up for racing, it's set up for what we've termed motorised recreational activities. So in theory it can cover anything from model aeroplane racing, drone racing, whatever. And so when we wanted to do something like Happy Laps had never existed.
no.
I had this concept. I said, I've got an idea called Happy Laps. I knew it was a good idea because my wife criticised it immediately.
All right, okay.
Right? And then when I gave it to Keith Lewis, I said, we're going to do Happy Laps. He sort of looked, I knew you're crazy, boss, but you really are. Believe it or not, Happy Laps in 3 years grew from non-existence to a $180,000 product line.
Did it really? Wow, okay.
Right?
Yeah, so it's popular.
It's so popular, and of course, with Happy Laps, the target market was, let's go out and find people who've never been on a racetrack. Because one of the troubles you have with getting people on a racetrack is, I'm going to die, right? So we went to people, Hewlett Packard Engineering Services, Social Club. Okay, guys, this is the deal. $25, I'm going to feed you a breakfast that is so disgusting you won't believe it. It's a cholesterol-reducing breakfast. Yeah. 8 hours after you eat it, your cholesterol will go down.
Okay,
right? And you're going to get 20 minutes on the track. Just driving around the track. You've got to follow road rules, but that's it.
You've got to behave yourself.
You've got to behave yourselves. What was one of those people that started out doing? Oh, the AE86 Car Club.
All right.
Right? Or not a club, it's a forum. Facebook page, really. So they came out, and gosh, within 2 years, 3 years, they went up through a fairly seamless progression from Happy Laps. They came out and did some sprints with us, some lap dashes, and now we have AE86 is a category within the CAMS Championships.
Right,
Now that grew from Happy Laps.
Okay.
So CAMS can't do that. They have no idea how to do that within their structures. So that was what Races was all about.
Okay.
And that's how it's grown. We're doing about 75, 80 motorcycle ride days across the country.
Okay.
Okay. One of the things that you've got to look at in this business is there are silos. So you've got motorcycles MA, you've got drags Andro, you've got etc. So what Races was set up to do was to take the bottom 30% of the market across all silos. So with a Races clubman licence, you can go and do the drags at Morgan Park on the Saturday afternoon. Saturday night, you could come and do the roll racing at QR, and on the Sunday, you come here and do a sprint. All with the one vehicle, all those different activities. Whereas previously, you would have had to join 3 different clubs to have to be able to enjoy those activities. So, as a racer myself, in the 90s, late 80s, 90s. One of the things that got me was you always felt locked in. If you had a Chev, you were a member of the Chevrolet Club. And you only ever went to do the things that the Chev Club wanted to do, you know. And then you decided, well, look, I'd really love to have an HSV. So now you've got to join the HSV club so you can do the stuff they do, right? Or, in my case, a BMW and a Porsche and a whatever, right? So those were the barriers that I was really looking to break down with races. And I think we've been quite successful. And the major thing is that the average life, the churn, if you like, of people in motorsport generally is about 35%. So people are in there for about 3 years and then they move on. We have licence holders in races that have been with us with a clubman recreational licence that have been there since 2010. So we've had 10 years of productive relationship with those people.
Going back to CAMS, are they still sort of a fairly strong outfit, and they are still prevailing over most of this motorsport activity in Australia?
Well, firstly, they're kind of limited in that they're limited to what the FIA would approve. So it's what I was saying before about happy laps and so on. My concern for CAMS is going back to what I said earlier about their stronghold is the racer market, especially the elite levels of the sport. And I see those elite levels fading away, unfortunately. So CAMS may have to find more ways to be more relevant in the future.
Interesting. You know, we sort of engage you guys to do quite a few of our track days, our car club track days each year, which we're very grateful for because you put on a very good product for us. What's involved in preparing a track like Lakeside or QR to host us for a track day? Is there any things that we need to sort of be made aware of? That is a multi-dimensional question. Yes. Okay. So the first thing that has to be looked at when we want to put together a track day, a club track day, is that we have to put together an event description or a product description which defines what the risk matrix looks like. What are the delivery requirements for it in personnel? What are the delivery requirements for it in equipment, etc. So is there a timing? Isn't there timing? Do we need a doctor or we need a paramedic, etc. Okay? So all of those things have to be put into the matrix, if you like, first of all. And then when the club comes to us and said, we want to do something, there comes a point where we say, right, is it a turnkey? And that means that Queensland Raceway's operations or track action or races even is what we call the event provider. That's the event delivery mechanism that has to be looked at. Once we've got those things sorted out, and you say, well, we want to run it, well, then we say, okay, you need to supply these things, okay? And that's when you decide whether you want a turnkey or you've got your own medics or you've got your own flaggies or whatever, okay? Once that has been decided and put together, we know that we're going to deliver to that event description, and we know that all of those, what should we say, the enabling facilities are in place. And then the next thing, of course, is just to make sure that the track is ready, clean, rooms are ready for you, etc. As an extension of that with races, what we have now done is to automate the online entry systems that we've now put together, so that an event provider can be anybody. So you decide you want to run some sort of an event. Races will work with you, put together that event description. We will then get that approved by our Lloyd syndicates. Once it's approved by them, and that's almost today for us a one-day job because we've run so many events and invented so many events. Okay, so from that point onwards, we now have $50 million worth of insurance. We now have your personal accident benefits insurance in place. At that moment, once that's done, it only has to be done once, you now build a template, and that goes up on the race's website, and you just send a note out to the club to say, hey guys, we're running a sprint session and we're running this session and that session at QR on that date, and you enter here. So you then go into that portal, so races.world, you tap on the calendar, you tap on the event you want to enter. Do you have a clubman licence? Yes, you put your clubman licence number in,
everything comes up on the screen like that. Okay, is this the event you want to enter? Click yes. And then the next thing you say is, do you want to pay by Visa card, or do you want to pay by Zip Pay or Afterpay or whatever? So there's a number of payment gateways. And then when you tick that one, what happens is it goes into the system. The next thing is the event provider. So whoever in your club is running this event, so there's no longer a need for an event secretary as such, right? Because all of that's being done. The money goes to your account, all of that. And you then look at the list of people who want to be in that event, and you say, well, hang on a minute, we're not having him back. So you don't accept that entry, and therefore the payment doesn't go through. So it's just refused like that.
Okay.
Likewise, if somebody new is going to come on board, they have to apply for the clubman licence up front. And that once they've applied for that, they can enter your event. If you wish to have people from other clubs enter your event, you can now just advertise your event to the Porsche Car Club and the MX-5s and whatever, and they just go to that event, they click on it and they get into, and so on. And when you've got all the people you need or whatever, you can just close it down and say, sorry, entries are closed for that event. Sure. Every time you accept the entry, within 48 hours the cash goes back into your account. It's that simple.
Okay.
And then on the day, you, well, it depends on who's running it, but as you would have known perhaps, everybody now signs on through iPads.
Right.
Okay, so there's a tablet sitting there, you put your name on the tablet, it takes your photograph. We've actually had people pretending to be somebody else.
Right.
So we take the photograph 3 times, they sign on. We can typically sign on with 4 pads out here. We will typically sign on 120 people in 10 minutes. Now that used to be a 45-minute paper job.
Exactly right.
Right?
Yeah.
So that's the level of technology. So that's what Races does.
Right.
So its role is to bring in entrepreneurial event providers, whether they be within a club or a private individual or a major company that wants to run something.
Okay. Right. So in relation to the track days that we do here and at Queensland Raceway, what sort of insurance cover therefore do we have, you know, if something does go badly wrong?
Right.
Could you elaborate on that for us?
Yeah, sure. So we there are a number of different insurances in place. Okay, so the major one, of course, is that everybody worries about is the public liability and product liability insurance.
Yes.
So that's a $50 million policy. So in any given year, we have a $50 million resource available to us from that. We run a personal accident policy, which is $75,000 in the event of death, up to $110,000 for permanent disablement, and then there's about 3 years. 3 years is $650 a week, for etc. So there's quite a policy in there, and the reason we can have these policies is, you know, we've got 10,000 licence holders, right? You can't do that with 50 or 100, no. So that gives us the mass to market for the personal accident policy. We have what's called errors and omissions cover. Everybody stuffs up occasionally. It used to be known as professional indemnity. So we carry, I think, $1 million policy for that one. So that's the suite, if you like. So if you're injured, you as the person get that. If there has been some negligence or something on the part of an event provider and you want to have a go for the event provider, well, the event provider has that level of coverage. That level of coverage also exists for the venue. So, tell me when I'm getting boring, but so there are 3 groups that Races deals with, and they are the venues, the event providers, and the participants. Okay, so the venues is pretty obvious. Now, what is really different? We don't issue a track licence. We accredit a venue for an activity. Okay, so if we look at Queensland Raceway, for example, it will have accreditations from Races for happy laps, for sprints, for regularities, etc. Once those accreditations are put in place, they don't change. Okay, so if you have this track configuration, you can run any event up to that level. So you can now design a track which is relatively cheap, to put together because you're going to do a low risk event. And you're only accredited for events of that nature. Now you as a venue can turn around and say, hey, anybody want to run a lap dash? Lotus Club, BMW Club, Porsche Club, you want to run that? Yeah, great. Well, you can run that on the DTC and that's $1,000 for the day, okay? And because it's a short track, less than 2 kilometres, and because it's a low risk venture, your accreditation cost for that will be $165 or $150 plus GST, right? And now what we've done, of course, is made something that is highly scalable. So you go and invent a product, your name is Michael Gilbert, and you invent Power Cruise, and you say to racers, I want to run this all over Australia. Exactly where do you want to run it? Okay, I want to run it here, there, and so on. And we then go to the venues and we look at what the venue is, what the configuration requirements are. We put that together and say, there you go. So Noosa Beach Classic Car Club comes to us and says, can we run this hill climb under races? Let's have a look. So we walk up the track, we have a look at what it is, and we can say, look, as it stands, we'd allow you to run cars up to say 200 horsepower, something like that. Right. Okay, now we want you to use some of our coda barrier and we want to use some triplets, and with that you can have it as an open track. And that accreditation stays with the track.
I see.
Okay, so instead of having a cam steward come around, and as we all know they can be different from one time to another, what happens is the event provider comes up and he says, I've got the event accreditation document, great, it's all there, they sign to accept the track, just as the marshal would do for cams, and they can start their event. Simple as that.
So the level of cover that you offer through this arrangement is equal to what cams?
No,
Is it?
no, because there are always differences. So cams, because it runs these very high level events, it runs a $100 million PMPL. A matter of interest, the biggest actual payout that I've been able to find under a PMPL in Australia is $8 million. There may be a bigger one, but that was the biggest one that we could find, which was for a 6-year-old girl severely injured in a swimming pool at a country town. Now there may have been more since, but that was 20 odd years ago. And that's when we said, well, given that we have legislation in most states now for what's known as obvious risk activities, your chances of getting above about 2 million are very limited now. So $50 million cover is, I mean, it's almost a fictitious number.
Okay, but it's governed by the insurance company as to how much they'll be willing to pay out.
No, it's what you'll pay for.
What you pay for.
If you put the money on the table, they'll supply it.
They will?
Yeah.
Okay.
See, that's how we got the insurance in the first place. When Cam said, no, you'll never get it. We went for a $25 million policy in 02, and as I say, I think it was about 360,000. At that stage, CAMS was paying about $1.1 million for a $100 million policy. But, I mean, they had a huge swag of events and so on that they ran.
Exactly. Righto. In relation to Lakeside Raceway here, is there any thought of starting a museum for sort of lakeside memorabilia?
Yes. One of my failings / disappointments is the fact that we never did get our museum off the ground. We worked very closely with Ian Bone and the Queensland Motorsport Museum, and they basically were given the bottom floor, the bistro, and today there is still some stuff there, and I'm embarrassed because it's been there for 12 years.
It is.
Okay, it should have been updated and so on. We have worked with the old Pine River Shire Council to have their museum people, because they had a museum, to take this over, and we worked with them in, I'm guessing it was about 2012, 2014, somewhere around there. And we supplied a lot of equipment and cars and things, and they did at Petrie, old Petrie Town.
Yeah.
We had a very good show there for, I don't know, it would have been about 8 weeks. And we were told it was one of the most popular that they'd ever had. And the fact that people like Max Volkers were still around the place and would come in and talk about stuff, you know.
It's a blast from the past.
Yeah, it sure is.
Max.
Yep, the girls didn't have to dig him up, very fortunately.
Yeah, okay.
But it never came back to here, and so I was a bit sad. In 2011, I spent quite a lot of money trying to, because it was the 50th anniversary and so on.
That's right.
So next year for the 60th, maybe we'll have a look, and assuming we have, I'll say, security of tenure over Lakeside, then we would look at doing something more like that then.
My understanding in relation to Lakeside arrangements here, John, was that you had a 40-year lease on Lakeside. Is that accurate or not?
Sort of. We have a 30-year lease with a 10-year option.
I see.
Yeah. How old am I going to be? 20. Yeah. Okay. 2047, I'll be 102, so I'll probably still be cranky. But all right.
From a distance.
Yeah. When that runs out, I would hope that we continue to find and create revenue streams that make the place viable. Running a racetrack or maintaining, I should say, a motorsport venue, very expensive. This place chews up about $600,000 to $650,000 a year.
Okay. In outlays and expenses. Okay.
Yeah.
Righto.
And as I say, we're in the fortunate position we can share those expenses with QRs and get some economies of scale. So I can have one mechanic to do two places and things like that.
Yeah, that would make sense. Fair enough. Now, in relation to driver training and education, I understand Lakeside does offer a solution in that regard. That's still the case?
Yes, the driver training centre, there's a company called Skid Control. They're going to be doing about 75 events on the driver training centre this year. And that is all about taking people who are hoons and giving them a chance to hoon and learn something from that behaviour. The government doesn't really approve of that as a mechanism. They seem to think if you don't teach people how to skid, they won't skid. And as I said, the last time you want to learn to handle a skid is when you're in the middle of it.
And never experienced it before.
Exactly. And I've always said that if you actually get people skidding a few times, they get scared of it, not happy about it, unless they're become a drifter or something like that.
Oh, exactly right.
The other thing we do here, look, and it's been a couple of years, I don't know why it's dropped off, we always ran a blind driving day. So,
Please explain.
Please explain. Well, you take a blind person and you put them behind a steering wheel.
All right.
Right. And we would get some volunteers who are driver trainers in cars with dual controls.
Right.
And they would go out and drive around the track. So blind people would be actually driving around Lakeside. And it's an amazing thing. On about the third lap, they know where the track is.
Right.
You would not believe that.
Yeah.
And initially they're very timid. They're travelling at 40 kilometres an hour. We'll go here and we'd send out 4 or 5 cars at the same time. Yeah. By about the third lap, they're starting to get it. And I still remember one guy, one of the trainers, and he said, I looked across, we're doing 120 kilometres an hour down the straight, and I looked across and this guy's, and he said, look where you, oh yeah, it doesn't count, does it?
That's almost scary.
Yeah, so we did that with the Institute for the Blind for quite a few years. We do Starlight Foundation and quite a few of those things. So I guess all told, we probably do about 20 odd charity days of some description. We just cooperated with somebody for the bushfire relief.
Yes.
And even if it was a rainy day, we raised $4,000, which was given to the St Vincent's.
Yeah, good. Because you're heavily involved in our charity day that we hold every year.
Yep.
And that's been a wonderful thing for you to do for us. We're very grateful for it, and I'm sure it's going to be.
I think it's just worthwhile.
Absolutely.
I mean, we enjoy life so much. If we can't give something to the people that can't enjoy it at the level we are, what sort of people are we?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, we need to be compassionate I feel.
Yeah.
So that's good. All right, now just a blast from the past.
Yeah.
John, I just want to show you this particular card that I'm a holder of. It's a Lakeside Motorsport Complex foundation.
Number 78.
Yeah, number 78.
Was that your age at the time?
No, it wasn't.
Okay.
No. That must be close to. No, I won't say that. But there you go. A foundation membership card that entitled you to sort of free general practice and reduced entry into events.
So this was like the members card for Queensland Raceway,
yep,
to the old Motorsport Queensland.
Right. Yeah. So
I have never seen one of those before.
wow. Okay. Well, they do exist.
Yep.
I'm number 78, so I don't know how many are out there. That was happened, obviously, prior to the track closing in August of 2001. So there you go.
Yes, the Saxewskis did work to try and keep this place alive, but
They did.
they, and I'm not being unkind, I don't think when I say this, they didn't adapt their business model to the changing times. And as we all know, if you don't adapt to your market, well, the market's gone and you're left behind and you're gone.
You know, and this is speaking personally, when I look at that vision of the 1969 Australian Grand Prix held here at this track, there was no pits. There were no pit bays or pit covers.
No.
You're out in the open.
They pulled up next to the Armco and the wing had come loose and the mechanics jumped over the fence with their hacksaws and standing there with the cars going past.
Really?
Yeah, and there they are cutting off this wing.
Cams allowed that?
Well, I think in those days they had a bit more of a laissez-faire attitude.
Yeah.
As I say, you don't realise how far the technology has come until you realise that in 1965, Sid Saxewski offered $10,000. Now that was a lot of money in those days. What would that be today? $150,000 or
Easy
something?
or more?
Yeah. And that was offered to any driver that could get under 60 seconds around the circuit.
Wow, okay.
The people he offered that to were the Tasman drivers.
Right.
So we're talking about Piers Courage, Jackie Stewart, right? Graham Hill, that's the name I was trying to think of, thank you.
Right,
Yep.
Chris Amon,
Yep.
all those names?
All of those names,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
None of them could crack 60 seckons around here in
65.
what was a Formula One car, right, in those days.
Okay, yeah.
Nowadays, in our street sprints, we routinely have WRXs, Evos, etc. that are lapping here in 57 seconds. And I can tell you the guy behind the wheel is no Jim Clark or Jackie Stewart, right?
Oh, okay.
And yet that car can get around here in that time frame. It is remarkable. You know.
It is. And speaking of time frames, I mean, the outright lap record here at Lakeside is a low 46.6 seconds. How quick is that? What's that average speed?
More than I'm ever going to do, I'll tell you. So that was Paul Stokell in a Formula Holden.
Yes.
And Paul Stokell to this day uses that as part of his laurels and is absolutely entitled to it. And as he said himself, it didn't seem that fast a lap at the time.
Really?
And it was afterwards when he got those times, because he was in the 46.8, 46.9, and that one popped in at 46.6. And I don't think anybody will ever go faster around here, even with the widening of the track and everything else that we have done. I really don't think anyone's going to beat that number. 2.5 kilometres, 46.6 seconds.
Yeah, you can do that.
Blind crest, blind exits, all of those things that today are not allowed.
When was that done? Do you happen to know?
I do, and I can't remember it. Would have been in, I think, about 91.
Okay.
91, 92.
Okay.
Yeah.
And was he the only one on the track at the time? You don't know? Were others on the track?
I believe it was in a race.
In a race, yeah. Wow.
So somebody must have been chasing him pretty hard.
Yeah, that's right. So there would have been others getting close to those sort of times.
Yeah. Those Formula Holdens were an underrated vehicle.
Right.
They should have been taken to America, and they would have been a major category in America with that engine, that level of reliability, and all of the things that thing did. They would have been, I think, they would have been a hit.
Just on another matter too, John, whilst we're chatting, I'm hearing, and many others have heard, that Speed on Tweed is being resurrected this year, and many of us are looking forward to it. Do you have any involvement in Speed on Tweed at all?
Through races and track action, yes. Okay. One of those moments. Mm-hmm. Went down to Murwillumbah, had a wonderful lunch. It's always a bad start. Met with the guys that were trying to get it back together again, and especially Dion Andrews and Michael Simmons.
All right.
And is it feasible that we can do this? So we went and walked the track and came up with it. And remember I was saying before, the flexibility of races. So we've got a venue plan that we put to SLE and then to Lloyd's. So our role in that will be to deliver the entire motorsport component, the administration, etc. They will do the promotion and the storyboard for the event and all that sort of stuff. I'm seriously looking forward to it. Yeah. So there's a lot of hurdles to go through. We've got to get through the council, we've got to get through the police.
Right.
But yeah, it's good. I mean, we've been doing Oakey sprints now for, pardon me, about I think 8 years. And because of our softer barrier systems and stuff, we can do these street events with a great degree of safety, and that's exactly where we're going with Speed on Tweed. We've walked the course, we've checked out the bits and pieces, and as I say, that venue accreditation process is well advanced. So if we get that, if the council agrees to closing the streets, the police agree to allow us to run it. The first weekend, the weekend before Bathurst,
is it? Right.
Is when we're scheduling to run it. Right. We're already building barrier systems for it and stuff like that, so we're pretty confident it's going to go ahead.
It's in progress.
And that's my enjoyment project for this year, as well as doing the Noosa Hill Climb. In fact, I want to run my 1979 PRS Formula Ford up that hill.
Right.
I think that will be worth doing.
Indeed. And with Speed on Tweed, they're pretty confident they'll get, about 130 sort of entries?
No, we're looking, this is, when I say we, I'm now taking their organisation into that, just to be clear. They're saying 250 entries, and they're extending the date possibly to as late as 1991. And to make it a more up-to-date event.
Yep.
It has got me wondering about another event called Muscle on Murwillumbah.
Oh yeah.
I don't know. Let's get this one out of the way and we'll get Noosa done.
And we'll cross that bridge when we get to it.
Well, the QRO track action organisations this year are delivering 330 events. 330 events. And none of that is involving a V8 or a CAMS licence or anything.
It's almost one a day. Where do you put them all?
Yeah, well, this weekend we're running 5.
Oh, yeah.
Last weekend we ran about 5.
Wow, okay.
You know, this is not counting what we run through the week. Okay. And don't forget we put 3.5 million candle power in at QR so we can run night events.
Yeah, I did hear that.
Yeah,
that's right.
So
we had a night, regularity thing about a week or two ago out there. Yeah.
So, well, see, that's going back to what you were saying before about you've got to follow the market.
Yes.
Today's young male doesn't have weekends because he's taking Johnny to violin lessons or some bloody thing, right? So what we have done is to say, well, Dad, you've got to be allowed one night a week out. So how about we run something that goes from 6 p.m. till 10 p.m. And that way you can come out through the week. So those events are now getting populated by fathers that otherwise would not really be able to meet their domestic duties and enjoy motorsport.
Yeah, well, they've got to let off steam, got to relax, and there's a market for it.
And there's a market for it. Absolutely. People want to do it, and if you don't do it, then what do? They go and find something else to do. Right.
Well, we'll take the opportunity now to wrap it up, John, but thank you very much for your time tonight.
Most welcome,
Greg. And it's always enjoyable to be able to engage with you and sort of enjoy the camaraderie and the services that you render for us here at BMW Club Queensland.
Motorsport for everybody, mate.
Indeed, mate.
That's
we all
the way to
enjoy
go.
it. Thanks very much, John.
Thank you, Greg.
Thank you.